All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of This Week in CBL. Our fearless leader, Ash, is away for the evening, taking care of some stuff for his dog, who is, if anyone cares, and you should, doing okay. So it's just going to be a little bit different tonight. I'll be leading off here. You guys know who I am, and if you don't by now, I am surprised because I have a loud mouth, but I'm Ram, representing UConn. Joining me today is a regular and Chris, representing FIU, and somebody here for the first time, and allow him to introduce himself if he would take a moment.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Chris. Nice to see you guys. My name is Ty. I'm the Gamecocks, South Carolina, in the CBL League. And I've recently joined BDS as a writer and content creator for their Substacks. You've been seeing me posting some stuff last couple of days. If you've had the chance to check it out, we're going to chat about some of the studs list later on today.
Absolutely. So, Ty, we're happy to have you both as far as a Substack and on here on the podcast. I know that you're a lot more focused on general baseball content, so I know we won't badger you too much with the CBL, but
I'd be in the CBL if I had a winning team, but here we are.
Yeah, but you're in the CBL, right? And so they've heard a lot from me and Chris as we kick this off. I like to pick people's opinions on this. I can imagine that you've never been in another 128 team fantasy league. If you did, I'd be shocked. Right.
Yeah.
But as somebody who's in it, and you're not in the cutthroat area of the people who are competing, trying to secretly get hitman hits on each other, things like that. Right. What's been your experience so far in the league? How do you feel about it? Like, would you recommend it to people? Do you think that it attracts a certain section of people? What do you think?
It definitely attracts a certain section of people, and I think the people that want to be in CBL are the people that want to be in as much fantasy baseball as physically possible. I've not seen a league come from the floor within 6 months have as many messages, trades, moments ever in even the leagues I've been in for 5 or 6 years. Like, you don't get this kind of rivalry and this kind of like gumption in the league in the first 3 months of its first inaugural season. So that has been outstanding. Like I said, my team is not very good, but I'm on Discord a lot, and I love keeping up with all of the trade talks and stuff. It's been quite entertaining. Even if I'm not winning in this league, it's probably still my most entertaining league.
So do you still keep track of everything week to week in terms of your team's progress? Or
yeah.
Do you? All right. So how'd your team do last week before? Because I'll ask Chris too. How'd your team do? How do you feel about your team?
I picked up a win, which was really nice. And I'm just pulling up my actual numbers here.
Yeah, go for it. Because if you want, in the meantime, I'm 99% sure Chris knows exactly how his team did last week. Because for anyone who doesn't, Chris's job is actually taking care of his CBL team. He's very obsessed with it. So, Chris,
absolutely.
Going right to you, Chris. How did your team do last week? Because I'm sure that you know.
So honestly, last week was the most eventful week for FIU. We were playing the other juggernaut in the American Conference. No shot at anybody else there. We know we have a lot of good teams there, but Columbia, it was a 1-2 matchup that could, really set things pretty interestingly up for the conference tourney. I had a game ahead. I was a game ahead of Columbia, so going head to head, I wanted to get that space every day, pretty much back and forth on who took the lead. And at the end, our faithful commissioner, that his pitching did him in on Sunday, and I needed a couple negatives, and I got a pretty big one with Eflin. That ended up, propelling FIU over the Columbia Lions and also my Buttermaker matchup. So it was a pretty good week for FIU.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Buttermaker matchup, and I'm going to go back to Ty before I start talking about the Buttermaker. Ty, what do you got for me?
I actually went 2-0 last week. I must have fallen asleep before they finished things. But I think this was the first time this year that I've gotten a full slate of pitching in without guys being sent down. I'm working with a couple of pitchers that are not always on the major league roster. I've got David Festa going, and then Emerson Hancock, who sometimes is the best pitcher in the world, and sometimes I won't start him against the Rockies. And you never know what is coming. So where I am right now, I'm kind of just in this, I'm going to showcase all of my talent at all times in case somebody else sees talent here and wants to come and buy some talent. I'm not going to be sitting guys and letting them rot on my bench. But I had 9 starts last week, and compared to where I'm scrolling down this list, I'm like, I can't even see how many starts people have had. But I think 9 was okay. I set myself up to be competitive, and I took a last minute win over the league average. So I will take that. That's kind of been like my biggest bug this year is I'm getting my butt kicked by good teams, but I'm getting my butt kicked by average teams kind of at the same time. So I can't have that.
You mentioned starting Emerson Hancock, and Chris and I were talking even within the week about whether or not he was going to start Tyler Anderson or not, right? And this will come up a little bit later on the show for the CBL because it'll get a little bit more league specific, but we're going to talk a touch about it because it always comes up about the usefulness of pitchers in this league and how it can be extremely volatile, but it also can win you it can win you the week. I mean, the absolute definition of volatility is the fact that relying on these pitchers is going to win or lose you the week. And it's a tough one because it's not always the matchups that you would expect that will do this. I mean, you've got guys like Ty Anderson, I just mentioned, was solid throughout this year. He struggled against the Dodgers, but most people do. But at the same time, Emerson Hancock is a guy that I've talked about Kyle Freeland on this podcast. I do not ever in this league want to start Emerson Hancock or Kyle Freeland or any of these guys. And we've got guys on here, you started him. Ash just started Kyle Freeland and was close to cracking the top 25 before. And I don't know how. I think that, and you being in the Buttermaker, Chris, I think towards where you are, it's a huge mark of consistency because as much as we make jokes about the Buttermaker and the fact it's an in-season tournament, succeeding in the Buttermaker tournament, yeah, you can sneak by with some Cinderella stories in a week or 2 weeks, but doing this for 4 or 5 straight weeks, it's a big deal because it shows the mark of consistency on your team, right? And so in my case, I've talked about the fact that I haven't lost the league average, speaking for UConn, and I consider that a mark of consistency. I would have won all of my Buttermaker matchups except week 1 of the Buttermaker, which is really funny for me because, yeah, I'd still be cruising around right now, but I couldn't get it together that first week, and that's all that mattered. And I'll segue into, as our friend Peter here says, they'd like to thank Michigan. I'll segue into the Buttermaker for a bit, and I think it's really apt that we have you on, Chris, because you seem to be somebody that is going places in the Buttermaker.
I mean, you prefaced it beautifully by saying, being this far in is a model of consistency, right? And I'll talk a little bit about, the trajectory there. I think there's only been 1 week where I haven't scored over 800 points, and I think that week I scored like 790. So, after week 1, which of course was an elongated week where we had a couple extra days, my team's never cracked 1,000 points, right? I've consistently stayed in that 850-ish range pretty much every week, which has gotten me to this point. I had another tough matchup this week against Northern Colorado. That's a team that's been, steamrolling their competition. We didn't have them preseason anywhere near the top 25, and you'll see later on, where they're sitting at. It's just a reflection of how good that team actually is, and it was. In reality, I was speaking to the owner of Northern Colorado earlier in the week, and he'd gotten off to a slow start. Still put up 800, almost 830 points. So again, kudos to all 4 of the teams: DBU, FIU, Long Beach State, and Santa Clara. Being in the Final Four in the Buttermaker is difficult, especially this early on in the season, when teams are still figuring out what they want to be. Right, their identity isn't out there. A lot of trades, moving pieces back and forth. But I really want to give a shout out to, Mark's media darling, Long Beach State Dirtbags. I mean, they're the Cinderella here, right? And they have every chance to win it. It's interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Long Beach State week 1 and week 2, or week 2 and week 3, won by a combined like 1 or 2 points. And it goes back to what you were saying. That one matchup, you don't get here by luck, right? You do have to be consistent. But they got out of those holes because I think one of those weeks was like a 600-something point week where they still made it past based on their matchup. And look at where they are now, right? They took out who was at the time an undefeated Kansas State, right? Kansas State had a stinker of a week. But either way, they hadn't lost until they faced DBU last week. So, kudos to them. I'm sure Mark is really upset that he's not here to talk about his dirtbags, but man, I mean, it's been really fun. And this integration, mid-season is a good way to kind of have those outer conference teams meet up. I'll give kudos to Dallas Baptist. Right? I mean, I talked to Ram about this earlier in the week. If I would have played DBU last week, I would have won, which sucks because I get to play him this week, and he has like 17 starts. So, and the difference between his 17 and my 14 is that I'm starting Quinn Priester and Davis Martin twice. Right? He's starting about 8 or 10 aces a week. So it's doable, right? DBU hasn't been the leading scorer every week. So it is a tough matchup for me here in the Final Four, but I'll give him credit, man. He's played. I think he played Butler, he played Cal, he played Rhode Island. He now gets FIU, so he hasn't had a cupcake road here either. Probably the toughest road out of any of the teams, which is fitting since he, obviously has the monstrosity of that pitching rotation. He should have the hardest road, but kudos to all four of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here. So, far from me to try to give you any credit, Chris, because it's not something I like to do. But we can look at the numbers in front of us, and we can see the fact that Florida International did have the highest score of any of the remaining teams in the Buttermaker last week. And what is important about that as well is that, as you mentioned, Dallas Baptist is the far and ahead number one team right now. And they've, not to shock anybody, but I'm assuming when we reveal that top 25 a little bit later on, that they're still going to be at the number one spot. And yet, if you look at the numbers right in front of you here, Florida International, Long Beach State, Santa Clara would have each snuck by them if they were facing them in the Buttermaker last week. And they were not. They were facing Cal, who would have also beaten Kansas State because they had their worst week of the year so far. And so it comes down to the fact that, yes, consistency is important. It's good that you talked about that. And admittedly, there is a touch of luck here. Right. And as you mentioned, Mark's Darlings, the Long Beach State Dirtbags, they were ranked for a couple weeks. They got unranked due to the strength of some of the other teams. But Long Beach State is definitely a team that got unranked, not because they were bad, but because other stronger starting teams that were ranked to begin the season kind of reached the potential that people on the voting panel thought they'd get to. But Long Beach State is by far not a bad team. In fact, they're one of the highest scoring teams in the entirety of the league. And now they're facing Santa Clara, who is also, again, consistent juggernaut in the league. Final Four is real interesting to me. I love this because, Chris, you're a big talker. You're on the pod all the time. You have a chance to beat DBU, right? It feels fitting that of all the people that you've got a chance, you're the visible one of the four who are left here, that you've got a chance to go against the juggernaut because you always want the challenge, right? And Long Beach State is going against a similarly strong team to continue their potential beautiful Cinderella run, while at the time, at least going into this week, still not ranked. Right, so we've got three teams that are in the top 10 of ranking at least. I don't want to spoil anything, but at least in the top 10 rankings in Florida International, Dallas Baptist, and Santa Clara. And Long Beach State, who at least going in this week was not ranked and may stay out of those rankings. So there is a chance that we could see the final of the Buttermaker tournament being an unranked team and the top team in the nation, just to give one example here. And that's part of the fun of this league, in the fact that, that just doesn't make sense. We've got a 128 league, and we've got a pretty consistent voting panel and relatively strong correlations between the top performing teams and who's being ranked. And you might have a team that's unranked facing the top team for a night with the commissioner at the end of winning this tournament. Ash isn't here to defend himself right now. So
he told me he was doing it, though.
I appreciate that, Ty. It's a nice time for me to be very clear about the fact that no matter what you hear, that Ash might be out there telling you that it is a situation where you're getting an etched Pilsner glass or something. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. And it's very important to understand what's on the stake here. That's why Chris's team has been so motivated. I myself,
absolutely.
I've heard about the pep talks that he's given to Florida International before. Some AI imagery has been used and everything like that. I'm very impressed with the level of motivation that's going on. Ty, Chris and I have talked for a bit. Do you have anything to comment on the nature of this tournament or where we are right now? I've left the numbers on the screen for you too.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of what you're seeing in this league, especially. Like, I think the thing that makes this league so different, again, obviously, is its size. And you have a few guys go down on a Monday that won't make their Thursday, Friday starts. You make 3 or 4 trades. You've got 6 guys that are going to start Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So double, 2 start weeks are awesome in any fantasy format, but in a format where the trading opportunities are so plentiful, you can really just kind of like rebuild a rotation in a few minutes. send out a few messages, move some prospects, move some fab, and all of a sudden you've got 6 more starts, 7 more starts on the week. So I'm looking right now at DBU's rotation, and I would be happy with like 3 of these guys making 1 start this week, let alone some of them making 2 starts, right? Like, what day is it? Tuesday? I don't know all the schedules, but if Yama's making 2 starts this week, I'm scared. Like, that's not a team that I want to face, but it's a team that, there are so many ways in this league that you can get back. And obviously we're seeing that Chris super active in the trade market all year and is always looking for the next point getter, right? That's what it is, just chasing the next guy to get some points.
It's funny you say that, because at the end of the week, I made a deal that to some, I don't know if it'll make the cut for the trades, and we don't have to dive too deep into it, but I made a deal sort of to kind of combat DBU's volume of starts. I grabbed Kevin Gosman, excuse my toddler. I grabbed Kevin Gosman, and I had to send out, who was it? It was a senior Kevin Gosman for a senior Michael Garcia, which kind of hurt, right? I didn't want to move Michael. He's outscored Kevin Gosman, but at the end of the day, I'll take the deal for 2 seniors where I can potentially get a 60-point start from Kevin Gosman this week. Maybe I get to the final. And even if I don't, right, it's an extra arm in the rotation in case of injury, right? We had Jose Quintana, who I just acquired, get hurt last week. So I'd also made a deal just to get JP Sears as a replacement for Quintana for whenever he does come back. So, you hit the nail on the head, right? This is a league where someone goes down and within minutes you can already have its replacement, because there's, again, we reiterate this every week, it's 8 copies per player, right? And if they're not on the waiver wire, they're likely on a team that's active. Yeah. We have some teams that, won't respond, but with 8 copies of each player, the likelihood of that being all 8 unresponsive is slim to none.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in a 30-teamer. I lost Reese Olson, Spencer Strider, and Bryce Miller, and it's over. Like, there's no one's going to give me a pitcher. So, like, we're just sitting with what we have right now. But that's the beauty of this league, right? Is like, if you are trade savvy, and we were saying about how so much of this is luck, in a league this big, trade savvy will take you so far. And like, Chris, you're one of the first people I spoke to when I joined this league, and immediately it's got to be rapport building. It's got to be chatting with people, getting to know what they like in a deal, getting to know what they want their team to look like. And going back to that when you see that they've re-upped on different positions, on different types of players that you might want, and just going back and refilling that again has been obviously like big for you. Making so many deals in this league, you're going to have to leave with good relationships. You can't just like flame a guy, get pissed off, and then all of a sudden you lost a trade partner.
That's definitely happened, though. I want to be clear about the fact that people have done exactly that, and that might have been how the relationship with me and Penn State University yelling at each other all the time comes from. But no, it's funny because there are moments in this league, to speak to the positive side of what you were saying, that are very much reminiscent of real life, right? Where you can see that some teams, just like real life, are comfortable trading with one another because they have an established rapport, whether they respect each other's evaluation of players, whether they just know what to say to each other, they are comfortable trading. And we've seen, and this is something we'll review a little bit later on, not in the show, but down the line, there's hundreds of trades being made, but there are some dance partners that return to one another over and over, and it could be for quick things. And part of it is what opens the line of communication already. If you've already traded with somebody, you might say, hey, I know that this person is reasonable. I know that I can talk to them. I'll do this, right? Or as you were saying, Ty, you might know the direction of their team or what they're looking for. You might say, you know what? I know they're rebuilding already. I should go knock on their door and see what I can do to knock that out of the park. And you have more options in this league than ever. I was on a rant maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago about that, where I was looking at people and saying, listen, you need to pick a direction if you're in this league. That middling in this league, I feel like you don't have an excuse, because if you want to compete, there's tons of opportunities here to make money and compete in the league because you have a million trade partners. But on the flip side, if you want to rebuild and you want to sit there and say, hey, I don't want to actually compete right now, I want to even prepare for just 2-3 years down the line, You can do that. And hell, even if you say, I don't want to compete for conference, I don't want to rebuild, but I want to push for the NIT, you can do that. My own commissioner, who we've seen on the New York Hour with me, Luke, he's talked about acquiring guys, and he did from me, Shane Bieber, because he said, hey, Bieber might not help you much towards the playoffs, but he might be a big deal for me in the NIT amongst those other teams. And so people have talked about that because there's money to be won, and there's glory to be won amongst these things. So it's not just about competing in this league. It is about staying active, but honestly, just about any league, you're rewarded for activity, right? Mm-hmm. But speaking about rewards, and let's talk about the reason that most people are going to be viewing the stream anyway, besides our pretty faces, is going to be the top 25. And so without further ado, I don't want to keep anyone hanging here. I do want to take some time and talk about it. I'm going to get the top 25 up on the screen. We did have some changes in voting, I want to say, from last week to this week, and overall, we've had some people bow out of the process. We've had some people that had to take hiatuses. So you do see some changes based on that. I want to be clear to everyone on that. And with that being said, let's talk about the top 25. So putting that up here on the screen, we can see that Dallas Baptist is staying strong at that number 1 spot. Santa Clara has moved up 4 spots to the number 2 spot. LSU has moved up to number 3. Rhode Island to 4. Butler back up into the top 5. So we've got 2 Big East teams in the top 5. It looks like the Florida International Panthers have moved down 3 spots to 6, which is shocking to me because if I had to be honest with you, I think you had, as you mentioned, some of your toughest competition this week, Chris, in Columbia, and being able to beat them. I think that was, for me, that's one of those I'll put you in my top 5 type of things. Mm-hmm. So, and Cal drops down to 7 here too. A lot of the usual suspects we do see around the top 10. We have Baylor 8. Tennessee at 9, FAU rounding out the top 10, moving up 4 spots, getting a response to their query in the Discord to ask the voters to move them up a few spots. And Northern Colorado right there knocking on the door at 11. Columbia dropping a spot to 12 after losing to the Florida International Panthers. Speaking for myself, I'm over here at 19. I went up a spot. I've gone 4-0 in the last 2 weeks. I'm kind of glad that at least I'm staying strong around that top 20. Army jumps above me there. And before I get a little too deep, I will mention the teams that are right on the door of the top 25. The aforementioned Long Beach State Dirtbags at number 26, moving up 5 spots, likely knocking onto that top 25 if they can sneak out a win in the Buttermaker and in the team's regular games this week. USC with a huge drop down to 27 from 15. Clemson dropping 1 spot. The Utah Utes, who were previously not on this list, show an up ranking of 87. But the Utah Utes did have a good week, so I can understand that I believe that they received a top 25 vote for the first time this week, which is why their ranking has shot up that much. And Mississippi State also on there. Chris, I know this is one of your favorite parts of the show, so I'll let you talk. I see some of the bigger drops here. Kansas State dropping 7 after their worst week. Penn State holding strong. What stands out to you on here about the top 25 besides your own team, because I know you're going to mention that too, and I think that's fair to talk about?
I mean, I'm not going to dive too deep into it because we've had like you mentioned at the start, we've had a bit of a change in the voting in terms of who's voting each week. Hopefully, next week we can kind of have a more congruent set of 8, 9, 10, however many people we're going to have voting, just to kind of reach that consistency with it. One thing I'll mention before I dive into the teams is, last week we saw a different set of voters drop Santa Clara after a 3-0, if you include the Buttermaker, right? I think they went from like 3 to 6 or 7. They made sure to say that in the chat. And, I agree, right? Didn't really make sense to drop out of the top 5 if you go 3-0. Doesn't really make sense. And I'm not saying that because of myself, but you see again in the same instance, I think if I'm not corrected, I finished top 10 in scoring last week. Did go 3-0, played against the number 11 team. But again, the voters like who they like. At the end of the day, Rhode Island's undefeated. So, that has weight to it. Whether you think Rhode Island's undefeated and actually a top 5 team is irrelevant. They're undefeated. They haven't lost. They can only play who's in front of them. They got a big matchup this week against Butler, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to shake up that top 5 100%. We see Cal drop 5 spots. Why? Because of the pesky league average. The league average shot Penn State from 3 all the way into the teens. And it's happened before where we see, Kansas State, another team, 7 spots, lose to the league average. They were undefeated last week. The league average matters. Me and Ram talked about it right before we had some of the big teams lose to the big LA, and it's obviously not entirely telling of the true picture, right? Because you could just have had a bad week. But in reality, with 128 teams, if you don't beat the league average, something went wrong, which is why you see those big drop-offs with Cal, with Kansas State. But, you mentioned FAU. I'm sure they're very happy. I think they're the only top 10 team with a 3-loss record, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're the only one in the top 10 with 3 losses, which is interesting. Of course, when you put up 1,200 points in a week or 13, however he did, I think it's the most points scored in a week all season. You see that jump, right? Columbia, again, didn't really take too much of a hit. But I will give – I'm going to give a little bit of credit to the ACC, but also take a shot at him, and I feel comfortable because I know the Army owner personally. He's the one who actually got me into this league. The ACC is just not good, at least not right now, right? We saw the numbers. I think the Cal owner was the one who posted them. The ACC is dead last in scoring as a whole. They have 2 11-1 teams, the Army and Miami, holding it strong, but there's not a lot of sustenance there, right? It's just beating teams who aren't necessarily super competitive at the moment, and that could change, right? We haven't mentioned this, but if you don't know, we're already halfway through the season. 15 weeks, it's week 8. A lot can change, right? We still have a whole second half of the season left, but as it stands, Army and Miami, I know the Miami owner isn't going to be happy that he drops 3 spots, even though, I think he's still 11-1. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not 11-1, 13-1. If not 12-2. Either way, it's interesting. We mentioned Long Beach State; they're creeping up. A team that didn't get a lot of love that I'll give a shout out to is the Aztecs, San Diego State. They end up, Peter, that NIT run's gonna be glorious. I know it. But yeah, the Aztecs. I mean, they gave me a run for my money in the Buttermaker, and if you follow along, they're really a pretty high scoring team for where they're ranked. So, I mean, all in all, again, you see a bit of a consistency. You see the same faces in the top 10 more often than not, right? The league's kind of moving towards a consensus there. But the beauty of this all is it doesn't matter what you're ranked, because if you can get into, we talk about the conference tourney every week. If you can get into that conference tournament and get a spot in the playoffs, doesn't matter what you were ranked week 8, week 7, right? This is just bragging rights at this point. I know it's fun to look on Fantrax and see your number pop up and say, hey, I went up, I went down. At the end of the day, you just got to get into that conference tourney and show up and show out, right? You got to peak at the right moment. We may see some of these top 10 teams not even make it out of the conference tournament as finalists. So still a lot to be played.
Ty, do you see anything here that piques your interest or anything that you want to go off about?
I would love to see the Mets hit with runners in scoring position as well. Peter, I'm sorry. Don't tell Juan Soto, though. He's upset right now at the Mets. So, yeah, man, you're right. Like in this league, like I feel like so much of the headlining of this league is like just the sheer size and concept of it allows for so many different strategies that you wouldn't necessarily play for. Like being able to win money in so many different ways in this league. Like we're saying, if you have a slow start, if you don't do well in a specific week that doesn't hit you on this tournament, there's tournaments down the line. There's ways to still compete for money later on. So yeah, you're seeing maybe guys who start a little bit slow starting to pick up, and you're seeing guys, I think, get more comfortable with how to work the trade market, especially in this league being so volatile, and especially pitchers. We're seeing, it was 17-3 the last 2 weeks between who was owned in the top 20. But like next week, one of those guys could go 2 innings and you could lose 40 points, and that's the end of your week, So I'm really enjoying it. Like I don't have the stress of having to do it myself right now because I'm a bottom feeder, but I'm enjoying watching, and I'm enjoying seeing how many times people jump in here. It's so fast. Like, I don't know how many people in this league have jobs, but I've never seen so many people enter a Discord so fast in my life. It's unbelievable. I'll see a guy put a guy up for sale and he's gone before I can open the chat. Like it's crazy. it's fun, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that sentiment about the trade stuff because it's one of those things where I work on a different schedule right now than most people. So if I'm away at nights, I don't work around in the morning, and I'm not available for these things. So I might see a post, a notification, oh, this guy's up for trade, and by the time I get to it 2 hours later, he's gone.
He's been dealt
sold
3
for
times,
forever.
actually. It's not
Yeah.
just he got sold. He's been sold 3 times.
Yeah, no, and we've seen there are certain players. I mean, we've joked about this about I don't know if I'm allowed to legally say it on air because we got a strike once before, but I'm gonna just say that the movement of players freely. And by the way, I've posted in the Discord that we're talking about the top 25. I have opened up the link. So if anyone out there is listening and you want to come in and make your comments about the top 25 while we're talking about it, please feel free. I will gladly give you a moment to talk about it. As I look at the breakdown of the conferences here, Chris mentioned the ACC. I do have that quoted post from Cal that I'll pull up a little bit later, maybe right after this to discuss the conferences. But you can see there's 2 ACC teams in here in Army and Miami. And actually in East Tennessee, but they do have the least points scored of any division of any conference so far. So you can see that even with strong records, why Army, Miami, and East Tennessee may not be getting the love that some other teams are getting. And speaking for myself, I mean, I was once a top 10 ranked team, and I think the Big East has 5 still teams that are ranked in the top 25, which is nothing short of a pain in my ass. Because one of the 2 left undefeated teams, of course, is heading my division at the Rhode Island Rams, right? And so DBU and Rhode Island are the only teams that are left that are undefeated after Kansas State took 2 losses to the league average and DBU last week. And Butler, who's moved back up after their tough loss, was suffering from the fact that they lost to the league average. Right, but Butler in Rhode Island, myself, Bryant, who I'm facing this week, and the Binghamton Bearcats, who up to about yesterday had kept pace with my scoring, even though they had 1 less win than I did. The Big East is a tough slog. And you can see that other divisions, there's a lot of parity in terms of like the 12 has, or the Pac-12 has got UCLA up there at 17. I think that's their highest, right? But they've got 3 out of the 5 outside of the conference. Sorry, Cal is the highest, of course. So Cal and UCLA at 7 and 17, but 3 teams on the outside, Long Beach, USC, and Utah, are each receiving votes, and that makes up 5. We've talked about the American at any given time where, Chris's team is the highest ranked at number 6, but FAU is now there at 10. Columbia is there at 12, still Tulane at 16. Georgia Southern Eagles, a team that I've talked about that I think didn't get a lot of respect, is also there at 22. So I think you made a comment earlier in the week, Chris, about the Big East has the most points, and so it has a difficulty in that, but the American has a lot of depth. The Big 12, of course, has some of the best teams in terms of Kansas, TCU, Baylor, and the best team in the nation, Dallas Baptist. So I think we're starting to see some separation in the divisions I will see, and which conferences are stronger than others. Right. And you can comment on that if you want, but I'm not trying to cause a fight. I sometimes am, but I'll bring up that image in a second so we can talk about it, and then maybe we can cause a fight. But at the end of the day, that we are starting to see that teams have a different road than others, right? If we're being honest with each other, some teams have it easier than others, right, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to name any names because I know Ram's a little hot with him, but I will say, you mentioned the American. There's 5 teams. Marshall just got knocked out of the top 25. So if you include those, it's a 6 team. They're the only team that's beaten me so far this year, week 1, and they just fell out of the top 25. Right. So if you're in the American Conference, I don't want to spoil the graphic. Oh, there we got it. Okay,
yep, so I got it up there.
So like I was saying, the Big East, most amount of points, and they have 9 over 10,000 points. The Americans got 11, right? 11 of our teams are all over 10,000 points. And of those 11, you're going to see 5 ranked in the top 18, 19, I think it was, something around that. 1 just outside, probably like around the 30-something range in Marshall. Mm-hmm. So, we have, of course, we know who the juggernaut is in Dallas Baptist, but, your conference is going to entirely dictate how your season goes. I'm 13-1, but I also haven't played Georgia Southern. I haven't played FAU. I haven't played Temple, who was previously ranked in the top 25. I don't believe I've played Tulane. Maybe I have. I'm not entirely sure. But at the end of the day, as I said before earlier in the show, we still have 8 weeks left if you include this week, right? So you may have not started super hot, but you may have played the tougher opponents in your conference, right? Your points against that Ram loves might be a little bit high, which may be the reason why you've lost a couple. I know UConn's lost a couple because of those points against. And then there's teams, and I'm not going to single it out to say it to be in a mean way, but Penn State, for example, Penn State's up until last week. I can't remember who they played last week, but before last week, they really hadn't played anybody, right? And it starts to show in the rankings when you start losing to the league average and you're not putting up the points and you're saying, hey, this is still a good team, but at the end of the day, you haven't really played much, right? And that's not just PSU. I'll take shots at the ACC because I know the one leading it. And I know Ash is in there too, so I know he likes the back and forth. But the ACC has just not been super competitive in terms of when you look at it in the greater scale of the other conferences. Obviously, within themselves, super competitive. Army, Miami, Louisville, all those teams are going to fight for that top seed in the conference tourney, and it'll be a fun tournament for them, right? You don't have to look at it from in the greater scale of things, right? If you're one of those teams that's close to the 7-8 range in your conference, think about your conference as your league, or forget everybody else. Just go out and get into that conference tournament. Because at the end of the day, sure, the Big East has the most amount of points, but what do you care if you're in if you're in the ACC? You're never going to see them, right? At least not until the playoffs if you make it. So, again, this is all for fun, but I like seeing that the standings and the rankings kind of reflect the quote unquote power rankings that we got from the Cal owner here. Where you see, some of the bigger conferences, and we're going to have to probably talk to Ash and realign the Power Five. I think the American should be a Power Five conference. It's just how I'm going to say it. But, again, still halfway through the season, a lot can change, but definitely super fun to see all the numbers pop up.
Well, I will tell you that as you were talking, in wrestling, we've got a guy named Joe Hendry where you say his name and he appears. And you said the Big East so many times that I think the Big East commissioner himself decided to jump on and have a conversation with us. So I'm going to bring him to the stage here because I know he's always got something fun to say. So my resident favorite white rice fan, Luke. Luke, I brought you on here. We were talking about the Big East. We were talking about a million things. What brought you on? What piqued your interest to bring you on the CBL show tonight?
I know I'm a day early, but man, I just want to talk about the Yankees over the weekend, just spanking the Mets. I mean, resist. I couldn't resist. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night. I couldn't wait one day. Yankees are the Kings of New York. Number one.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. I'll give you 30 more seconds if you need to say anything else before I kick you off my damn podcast to front running off Cody Bellinger hit a grand slam that was less feet than Pete Alonso's liner off Fenway Park in a real ballpark the other day. So
it sounds like you have a lot of hate for that Cody Bellinger grand slam, but that's what got you the win in ABA. So I don't want to hear it.
So for context,
the Mets lose. But
for context, by the way, in another league in Best Damn Sports, Luke and I were facing off in that league, and he was leading me up until the point where Bellinger hit the grand slam. But I am a Mets fan, so the first thing I immediately said was that I've won, but at what cost? So I won, but I had to watch the Mets lose to Little League home run to do it. Am I happy about it? I don't know, but I like that I apparently have a rivalry with my podcast partner here, Luke. So, Luke, I'll let you go. I'll bring you on tomorrow night where I'll allow you gracefully to speak about the Yankees.
I want 1 whole hour of just Yankees. Yankees are better than the Mets talk. Maybe spend some time talking about Trent Grisham and how he should be on the roster, and how Ben Rice might be the second coming of Jesus. I don't know. Whatever.
I think if you want to have the most controversial and least watched New York hour that we've ever put out there, I can give you that hour at any time, Luke. But What do you have to say on behalf of the Big East before I cut you off?
Big East is number one. You can see them in the top 25. It just speaks for itself, and it's got the best commissioner. So, Chris, you can make all those faces you want, but Big East, if you want to join the Big East, you can absolutely join next season.
Listen, I don't think Steven would appreciate you trying to poach his best team out of the American.
I think Steven would agree that the Big East is the best. I think Ash would also agree that the Big East is the best.
I love the heat of those comments, by the way. First off, poaching. Secondly, the best team in the, I hope the rest of your conference is listening. I mean, rank wise, yes, so I
know FAU's listening.
FAU's out there making I do want to shout out FAU for not being available for the show, but being available to post on Trade Block. So I always appreciate I do want to say, because I know this one's gonna hit. I always love when a guy says they're unavailable to jump on the podcast, even for a little snippet like Luke does, but has the time to post on Trade Block. And if you make a trade during the show and you're not on the podcast to talk about it, I will call you out because you're there. You're actively doing things relating to the CBL. Get on here and talk to us. But anyway, Luke, I
appreciate the time. I got to run. I got to go trade for Augustin Ramirez. I'll catch you.
Hey, whoa. Hey, hold on. let me get off the pod for a second so I can call him.
Thank you so much, Luke. Take care.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right, so that was, as you know, the Big East commissioner, Luke, coming on here to mess with me because of the fact that I am a Mets fan. Here's Eric speaking on behalf of Brian saying, go Big East. It's starting to feel like a flood over here for the Big East support, and I do appreciate the activity out there. But the Big East is a very active conference, I will say that much. You hear a lot from myself. You hear a lot from Rhode Island. I'd love to get Rhode Island on the pod someday just to talk about everything he's done to build his team and the way that he approaches the Discord. I had another owner reach out to me saying that they think Rhode Island's full-time job is running their team today because they're so active on every trade discussion and everything like that. And honestly, it's realistic that there are some people who are very active in this league. Ty was talking about it earlier. You can watch a guy get moved 3 times in one morning, right? When we talk about the CBL. And there are some trades that I can pull up here that we can talk about when it comes down to it. We've got past the Buttermaker. We've got past the top 25 and some of the points. Before I get to the trades, I want to be able to talk about something else I was discussing with Ty beforehand, and we're going to talk about some hot players here. Now, Chris, I don't know, did you happen to see the post in the Discord about the balance between, you saw it, right? The post between pitchers and hitters, the top 20?
I didn't have the time to kind of dive in and actually see who those players were, but I did see the 17-3 breakdown between pitching and hitting. Yeah.
So Ash is a staunch defender of parity and the idea that the hitting is just as valuable as pitching, not only in this league, but everywhere. And he's built his team according to those lines. If you look at his team, he favored top level hitting over pitching. I happen to disagree at times, so I'm not going to use this to go on a tirade about that because obviously within short sample sizes, everything can look a little different, right? But I will share, this was brought up by Rhode Island, so I want to bring it up because this is the top 20 in CBL over the last 2 weeks, right? And so I screenshotted this exactly. So you might need to maximize your screen, folks, but you can take a look and see over the last 2 weeks. These are the top 20 performers in the 128 team CBL league. And as you can see here, if you were curious, as Rhode Island pointed out of these 20 players, 3 of them are hitters. And if I had to be honest with you, with outside of Ohtani and perhaps Devers, you see Suarez is right there at the bottom. This goes to show a lot of things. First off, this doesn't show that pitching is more valuable than hitting. As much as I'd like to make that claim, this is a 2-week span. I just think it's important to have the discussion. But some of the names on here, I mean, if you look at the last 2 weeks, right? If you thought Will Warren was going to be your guy, top 5, right? Chris Bubich is having an elite season. And these are things that, just even though it's the last 2 weeks, but Ty, I'll pick your mind on this too, because this is also something I had considered looking at for the Substack, right? Chris Bubich is pitching like an ace for Kansas City. A year after they got Seth Lugo to be a Cy Young contender. They're brewing something over there in Kansas City, right? This is also Cole Reagans and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Mm-hmm. Man, I have been super impressed with some of the lower glob pitchers this year, and especially the last couple of weeks. Bubic especially, and I I'm I'm pulling up some like actual numbers, so I don't talk off the top of my head here, but I am really, really impressed with the Royals pitching so far this year. And I wasn't expecting that I might be so deep into that rotation. And let me pull up some real numbers here. But yeah, Chris Bubic has been special, and I'm always thinking about Reagan's, obviously, but man, Michael Wacha 2, Seth Lugo is like just above a 302. I have been not anticipating that's where the wins were going to come from, is starting pitching in Kansas City, but it's happening, and it's happening for a few teams too. Like I'm seeing Merrill Kelly, obviously. Once we dive into that, Merrill Kelly's number 1 in my top 5 for the week for pitching, and it's just not flashy.
I mean, your
right?
guy
Like,
Hunter Brown is on there too. I'm gonna go into the top performers from last week too to bring this up in a moment. But I'll plug you for a second here, because one of the things you're doing for the Substack is talking about hot hitters, hot pitchers for the week, right?
Yeah.
And I know that this goes back 2 weeks, so I'll segue into just this week in CBL in a moment. But you see Hunter Brown's on here, which means he's been doing it for 2 weeks. I know that's one of your guys that made the list this week, right?
Sure is. Yeah. And even on a week with a loss, right? Like I'm not generally expecting to be putting guys on studs list who are taking L's in the week, but you couldn't have a better outing than Hunter Brown did against a Jacob deGrom type pitcher, and with no run support. Like you can't expect a guy to go a full 8 innings and not give up anything and expect to win a game. So a solo shot being the only mark against him, I think just goes to show what he's doing. Even when he's taking losses, he might have been the second most dominant pitcher that day. And I'm not surprised by it. I'm surprised just because I'm not super familiar with CBL scoring, like what these really mean, like deeper down. But man, if you're going 8 innings and punching out 9, you're in the studs list, and you're probably going to be top of something. It's a bummer that he couldn't get the complete game win shutout. Like that would have been awesome, but man, that it was super impressive, and like super fastball heavy, like all the time. He is going to put a fastball in your face at every at bat, start to finish. It doesn't matter what inning it is. It's 97, and he's not going to stop. It was interesting seeing him on the same mound as Jacob deGrom, kind of pitching like a fastball demon. I'm going to pitch you 0-0 fastballs, and if you can't keep up, you're getting 0-1, 0-2, and you're going to strike out in a fastball. And it happened a lot. Like 13 called strikes and whiffs on a fastball. I was loving it. Like I was having a blast. I was having a hard time deciding who to cheer for, because like when Jacob deGrom does Jacob deGrom things, I watch. But like that whole game was outstanding. That might go down as my favorite pitching matchup of the year so far.
And Chris, either speaking towards the pitcher-hitter disparity or speaking to the names on this list here in CBL, what are your takeaways from looking at this? Again, this is the top 20 players of the last 2 weeks in CBL scoring system.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? For those at home that are watching, or when you're watching, or whatever you're watching this, right? When we post it, I have one of these players, right, in this top 20. One. And in that same time frame, I'm 6-0, right? So it goes to show, right, how deep these rosters can be. I don't have a single pitcher on this list on my team, not a single one. I do have Devers, right? Shout out to Soto. I definitely won that deal. I'm not gonna chime too much in and get Peter upset, especially after the Red Sox just closed it out 2-0. Shout out Chapman, but. I will say, we have the Nathan Eovaldi's that have been, elite all year on this list. But we already mentioned, Chris Bubic, Will Warren, Merrill Kelly. Those are all names that, and JC can speak to this. He tried to sell Merrill Kelly for weeks and no one would buy him. Right. Mm-hmm. So it goes to show how quickly things change with this scoring system. Obviously a blow up, like you have a Tanner Houck type blow up in a week, it'll shoot you down the rankings really, really badly. So you do have to be consistent. and you obviously see some, you know, ace level names and Wheeler and Hunter Brown and all those that. So you have your standard, you know, 1-2 guys in the rotation on this list, but you have guys that, you know, in a way, sort of under, you know, Dylan Cease started off really badly. It's picked it up incredibly. I tried to get him over the weekend. Obviously, wasn't going to happen, especially not after his last 2 weeks. But I mean, it goes to show how important, you know, doing your homework is, right. We have the Substack, and we have a lot of different avenues to get information. Whether it be on, you know, obscure starts during the week where you don't necessarily know if the matchup makes sense. So again, to kind of just shout out Ty there with what he's working on in the Substack, give it a read, guys. Like it's not going to be like, oh, Aaron Judge is good, right? You're going to get those guys that maybe not even in the CBL, right? You're going to see guys that maybe in your 30 team are available on the waiver wire pop up, and some of those gems that we'll get into later and other shows this week that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, so before I go into the trade analysis with you guys for a little bit, right, I promised I'd move on to the top performers in CBL just of last week. And there are some guys on here that I know Ty is wanting to talk about, and I want to point out a few things as I lead off to get to him here, right? If you notice here, by the way, because the screen cap is taken for last week, the 5th highest scorer last week of anybody, pitchers and hitters alike, was Will Benson. And Will Benson at the time last week was rostered, if you look a little bit to your right, in exactly 0 conferences. Will Benson, the 5th highest scorer for CBL, was not on a single team last week. Unsurprisingly, Will Benson is now rostered in all 8 conferences. So that shows you how quickly the waiver wire moves in this week. But that being said, Will Benson is one of the guys that we did not expect to have the week that he did. You can see here as well, Cody Bellinger having a good rebound week, PCA continuing strong performances. Wilmer Flores, who also made your list, Ty, but a guy that I know that you want to talk about and I think is very relevant to discuss here because of his former pedigree is Miguel Vargas. So Miguel Vargas made your hot hitters list on the Substack, and in terms of third base, you can actually see here there's no question that last week he was the man of the hour. So if Vargas or anybody else on here that you see, what is it that you want to say to anyone who's listening?
Man, I really loved the first time I remember seeing Vargas on the screen was when he was just taking pitches in spring training. And I remember thinking, okay, I hadn't figured out what was going on yet. I'm like, this guy must be doing some weird like visualization technique. And like, he's playing every day. You know, he's not afraid of making a mistake because someone's going to get traded into his team and just replace him in 30 seconds and make a huge contract. He's playing with some confidence. He's swinging a lot more across the board. I'm seeing swings in good and bad situations, but swinging the bat is what is going to make you a valuable team member, right? You can take walks, that's great, but driving in runs is what you need to do. And he's hitting early in the lineup. Like, what was it? On Friday night, he had 808 total feet of home runs and a 375-foot double. Like, I don't think that we didn't think that he could hit. I don't think that he was in the right spot. And a team like Chicago, where pretty much the expectation is that you just play baseball. I don't really care how you do it. You just put a glove on and you go stand out there. And he's making it look really good. I don't know how long he's going to get to continue this. But you know, his hard hit rate is up 12% from last year. So swinging more and making good quality of contact that's a good recipe. So I'm going to keep track of him for a little while. Earlier this week, I've got a terrible memory, but somebody was mentioning in league advice about maybe buying him for Landon Raup. And I'm saying, or maybe it was the other way around. And I said, I think you ought to hold Vargas right now, right? Obviously your league format, it depends on what's going on there. They had a really stacked roster. I thought this, especially if he's going to have first, third, and outfield eligibility, I like him at a cost where it's not a flashy team and it's not a flashy name. And it's a guy that some people have kind of written off because his pedigree kind of fell off after the Dodgers. So I like him a lot. He's fully rostered here and he's available in like some of my maybe 15, 16 team leagues that people just like aren't putting White Sox in the front of their head. That's not what they're looking to buy. They're trying to actively sell them. And I might buy here. And even if it's a trade piece for them, I don't know what they're doing. I don't think I'm ever going to figure out what they're doing. but I really like him. And along with Will Benson, just two names I didn't think I was going to be writing down on my list this week. Like, especially with the week Rafi Devers had, like, Jose Ramirez is right there, but it was pretty much Miguel Vargas straight away.
Yeah, and I mean, by any nature of obviously some scoring systems for points are different. CBL is a points-based league that has some tweaks based on new scoring, but you do see it right here. Miguel Vargas, qualifying at third base and outfield, did outscore Jose Ramirez in our league, and that goes to speak with something in tandem with the top 25 rankings, because when we ranked these teams early in the year, we went off projections, our own analysis of these players, and who we thought would do well. But week to week, you can see things like this, and I'll ask you to comment on it here in a second, Chris, but you don't really expect top 5 player in CBL to be unrostered, right, going into a week, because if you look at Miguel Vargas again, he's still only rostered in 58% of leagues. Yes, he's rostered in each of the conferences here, but 58% of league, I mean, that's 42% of teams that don't have a rostered Miguel Vargas. And you even go down there, Wilmer Flores had an incredibly hot week. He's still one of those guys that I know first base is a little bit of a crapshoot, so some people don't look at him. They thought it was a platoon player, but some familiar names on here, like guys like Max Fried, Jose Ramirez, Paul Skeens, Brian Wu, right? But again, every week can be changed by a player here. 100-point turnaround for Will Benson, right? And 83 for Miguel Vargas. These are things that could change a week, yeah?
No, absolutely. You're totally right. Speaking of Wilmer Flores, I'm one of those Logan Webb owners that's moved and acquired him 4 or 5 times at preseason. So I don't really catch a lot of San Francisco games unless Logan is on the mound, right? I've talked to Ash, and I've said this on the Discord a lot. This has become my main league, right? So I'll tend to watch my players at FIU here at CBL than even so, if for example, let's say we'll speak about Logan Webb. Logan Webb's on and the Red Sox are on. I'll watch the Giants game because I want to see if Logan Webb can get me 60, 70 points in the start, right? So in speaking of that, I got to see Wilmer Flores in his, I think it was, how many RBIs did he have?
Was it 6? Last week he had 9 of his 13 RBIs. For
13. That was the Logan Webb start. Yeah. So, it was astounding. It was like he was stepping into the batter's box, and it was like you knew that ball was going to be crushed. It didn't matter what pitch it was. And sure, he did get the benefit of some balls right down the middle, but to make that hard of a contact, and we forget about Wilmer Flores, right? Like a lot of times we mention a lot of those elite bats, but he's been consistent, most of the year. Another guy that I really like to see on this list that I'm a big fan of, and actually I don't know correct me if I'm wrong, if the PCA fleece free is done. I know that was a PCA for Julio originally. I don't know if they decided on who the winner is, but PCA, man, I mean, he's been absurd, right? What we considered a defensive player, and kind of just he's in a middle of the rotation at best. Like, he's been absurd, right? The Cubs fans have to be super happy with what they've put out there so far this year offensively. Excuse me, with Suzuki, PCA, the ever famous CBL legend Carson Kelly, just point getters, right? And we're talking about fantasy, which is what really matters here in the grand scheme of things. And again, you mentioned we have some of those, and I just see we got a Penn State trade accepted, so we'll take a look at that in a minute. You see the regulars, right? You see the Paul Skeens and the Brian Woos and whatnot, and but you see some guys that were struggling earlier on in the season. I hate giving Yankee shout outs, but shout out to Cody Bellinger. I know a lot of those 88 points came in that one swing. Sorry, Ram. Or I guess not, right? You won in the ABA. That's all that matters. But it goes to show, we talk about the not being rostered Will Benson. You have to be active, right? You have to try to be the first one there to get those hidden gems, because the league isn't going to be won, or at least not necessarily won, because you had the 1-1 in the draft and you took Aaron Judge, right? It's going to be won in between those lines when you pick up the Will Bensons, or you pick up at the time the Carson Kellys, and you get them while they're hot, and you learn to sell them when it's time to move on, right? You can't get attached. It's why I don't know what the tally is at right now. I know we are over 700 trades in the league. I have about over 75 of those. You can't get too attached. I started off with one way, took on a bunch of Red Sox. Me and Peter became the meme teams with the Red Sox and the Mets, and I like being competitive. So I was like, you know what? I'm jumping ship. I want to have a more competitive team, and moved on. But we've mentioned that, and Ram had a pretty strong opinion about this earlier about how you don't have to be active, or you do have to be active to be, that correlation with those top teams.
Yes,
that you have to be active, right? You do see teams that may not be as active as others, right? But FAU and Rhode Island aren't good teams because they don't spam the trade block. As much as people can complain and say, "Oh, here comes FAU and Rhode Island," right, with the same trade block, they get it done, right? Whether we like it or not, they get it done. Kudos to them, because I don't have the patience to do that, right? I did that in the off season. I'm done. I'll acquire players here and there, but when you're out there fishing, you're eventually going to catch something.
Yeah, and I know that if Mark, on behalf of NCASE and the Virginia Cavaliers, was here, he's a big PCA guy. And Ty, you were actually just telling me right before we got on here that PCA is quickly becoming your favorite player. And that's one way to go about the league too. Sometimes you just want to go with your favorites. Like Chris just admitted to it. He went ahead and stacked up on Red Sox, and it led him to have a very competitive team so far. And I do firmly believe, I've said it on here multiple times, that being active is the way to go in this league. And it's part of the reason why we make so many trades and why we talk about the trades here. And I think it's a good segue to go into talking about some of the trades in the league this week. So I know some people like to trade to get on here and have discussions, so we'll throw up a few trades. We've hit an hour mark here, so we won't take too long, but we'll talk about some trades for a little bit before we let everyone go and talk about what was exciting in CBL this week. I do have a few that I was able to pick out of the Discord. I don't have the beautiful graphic budget that Ash normally has when he runs the show, so you guys are going to have to forgive me. We're going straight to Discord screenshots, but luckily they do post the contracts and stuff right there. So one of the trades we can talk about right off the bat, Rhode Island, as previously mentioned, one of the most active teams in the league, traded a junior Kyle Schwarber and a sophomore Mackenzie Gore to Iona, who shipped out Tariq Skubal, a sophomore Tariq Skubal. So, Ty, I assume you're familiar with the show so far, but generally what we do when we pull up these trades is we can talk about the trade to whatever extent we like, and we try to pick a winner, but there's no gun to your head. Don't feel pressured. You don't have to pick a side. We're going to come after you. But with the understanding of the contracts and the players involved here, you've got a year and a half of Schwarber and a year, 2.5 years of Gore to 2.5 years of Skubal. Who do you think came out better in this deal? I'm going to go to you first.
Man, I like this deal a lot, and I really think in a lot of these 2-for-1s or multi-for-1 deals, I'm looking at who the other person is filling those roster spots with. And if you had somebody huge coming off the IL, then yeah, like Rhode Island is winning this trade. They're going to get Tariq Skubal, and they're also going to throw a guy who is, maybe going to be somebody who makes a big difference for them rather than just letting somebody rot selling for fab. But man, it's hard. I'm hard pressed to not take the years of Gore and 2 more years of Kyle Schwarber hitting leadoff jacks. Like, it's one pitcher. We can see the volatility in this league. One pitcher could score you 90 points. One pitcher could blow his elbow out and not play again until 2027. Right. So it's hard. Like, that Kyle Schwarber consistency is, you can't beat it. He's doing what he's doing in the leadoff position, or usually in the leadoff position, better than anybody has ever done it. Like, I'm taking that guaranteed on base percentage. What was it, like 34 games or something?
Mm-hmm.
He just had an on base streak. That's insane. And Mackenzie Gore has absolutely turned it on this year. And the Nationals are not a team to sneeze at. Their Juan Soto return is playing like some of the best baseball in the league. Like, this has been so exciting. So I think I'm gonna give it to the Gales. Like, hoping that Gore continues to be the guy that we thought he was going to be, and he doesn't show signs that he's stopping. So I'm taking the Gales side. Yeah,
I'd have to agree here. I'm obviously a bit more hitter friendly on my roster. Partially, I took a bunch of negatives last week in pitching. Part of why I was in the top 10 in scoring was because I think I finished second or first in offense. Yeah. So when I saw this deal, I was talking to one of your Big East mates, Ram, and in Bryant, and it was interesting, right? Rhode Island has a really good team. He has the offense, he's got the pitching, so I understand the deal to get a Skubal, right? He's a one of one. He's that guy, right? But I think this is a trade where, again, just basing it off of what we have, right? I don't know who Rhode Island got back. I'm not entirely sure if they had someone in the IL coming up or if they made a deal for a bat 5 minutes later. Because I know he made this trade. I saw this trade go live, and I know 5 seconds later he posted he was looking for a bat, which is why Bryant DM'd me, and he mentioned, I feel comfortable saying it because Brian and I talk almost every day, but he mentioned he just sold one of the best bats in baseball and is now asking for a bat. So again, he knows what he's doing, right? He's undefeated for a reason. He has some rhyme to his reason. But for me, just looking at it right in front of me, I like the Gore Schwarber side. I like the years of control, right? You're equal on Skubal and Gore, and a year and a half of Schwarber is a year and a half of top 5 bat in baseball, no matter how you look at it. And he's doing it from the leadoff spot, right? You're going to get high volume of at bat. So from that perspective, I'll lean Iona, but also I don't hate it. It's Skubal. Can't go wrong with that. So slight edge to Iona.
One of the other things that I saw people, I think it was this morning, we're talking about was how people will hit the chat and offer players and then go, I would like an upgrade. And people were, kind of flaming it. And it makes sense. Like, yeah, I'm going to jump into a thing and be like, hey, take my $5, give me a $10 back. But that's like, there needs to be more context, right? It's like, if you've got a guy coming and you're at a roster limit, you need to make a move. If you've got a guy who maybe gets positional eligibility or loses positional eligibility, something happens to your roster situation. Sometimes a 2-for-1 deal is best for both guys. In my 30 team where I just said, I just lost a bunch of pitchers. Yeah, would I absolutely trade maybe one of my best hitters for 2 like pretty serviceable arms if I'm in the hunt? 100% I would do that, right? And it just is it's a makeup thing, right? But I do agree. I do get a good laugh when I see people putting up like top 400 prospects and they're looking for MLB upgrades. I do think that is like one of my favorite parts about the league. But yeah, I think the Gales, I don't think there's a loser in this deal. I think anybody getting Skubal in a deal is having a good day. And obviously, like we're saying, Rhode Island knows what they're doing, so they fill the gap.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo off the two of you here and agree with the fact that I would rather have the junior Schwarber and the sophomore Gore, but that's not because Skubal is a bad return by any means, right? This is your classic win now trade. Rhode Island knows where they are. They're one of the 2 undefeated teams left in a 128 team league. You have to push, and by doing that, you get the guy who's the former Cy Young winner. Gore is performing at a high level, and he might continue to perform at that level. And Schwarber, of course, is hitting, again, jacks all day long. It's all he does. But Skubal is Skubal. I think, though, this almost teeters too much where I don't know how to say it because I don't have the exact points in front of me, but I really like what Kyle Schwarber is doing, and this is a league that's points system favors power. So it almost might have been too much for chasing Skubal. But again, Skubal is a game changer. He is in a league that we've seen that one pitcher can change a week. It is a big deal. So this is a relatively fair deal. I just think it comes from the context of win now. And at the end of the day, that's how it works. You've got to swing big. Now, you mentioned Bryant before, Chris, when you were talking about guys that you talked to. We did talk about the biggies there. I'm going to swing one right back here that involves Eric and Bryant, actually, where he acquired Julio Rodriguez. So, and I'll kick it to you first in a second. As you can see here, the Bryant Bulldogs traded away a junior Josh Lowe, a junior Riley Green, and a junior Nick Kurtz. And Baylor's team traded away a sophomore Julio Rodriguez and a freshman Paul Goldschmidt. Chris, who do you got?
Why do I feel like I didn't see this? I'm so active. I didn't. You know what? Maybe I did. Either way.
That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here to throw you trades that you've never seen before on air, so you don't get to research and answer.
That's true. I will say, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to have this whole discussion again where we've laid rest to it. But it's interesting, right? That Riley Green, Nick Kurtz return is from that infamous 3-team deal, and you got Julio out of it, right? Sure, it's a name that it's not performing to where we would hope, but that there's that hope of Julio being one of those top 20 guys. It's an interesting deal because it's 2 teams ranked in the top 25 pretty much perpetually all year. So the freshman Paul Goldschmidt to me means nothing because Paul Goldschmidt's 85 years old, so he could have 8 years on his contract. It wouldn't matter to me. I think in the grand scheme of things, you're looking at this from Julio Rodriguez for Riley Green, Nick Kurtz, and Josh Lowe, and sure, Nick Kurtz is a junior, right? You'd probably want a longer contract on a player like Kurtz, still getting a feel for it. I'm gonna kind of lean Baylor's side here. This is a points league. Baylor's one of the best teams, and they're getting a lot of points back. Granted, the best player still is Julio Rodriguez, or at least to me, right? At least to the consensus. Maybe not performance-wise, but I like the upside that Julio has still to that name attached. I'm gonna lean a bit more on Baylor's side just because of the volume that he's getting back in points that are currently valuable. But again, Bryant is in that, and based off the conversations that I've had with Eric, he's in that decision whether he's going to go all out for this year and just sell all his valuable pieces for 26, 27, or kind of staying in the fray and seeing what he can do with the players that he's got, without having to sell off on the future, which I understand, right? You have to at some point come to grips with reality, and you see some of the top teams. If you don't think points wise, right, forget the record. If you don't think points wise you're keeping up, you may want that longevity, and you do get 3 years with Julio Rodriguez, right? And I'm not going to talk about the red shirts because again, you can't base trades off the premise of you're going to redshirt him. I don't know what's going to happen. Cool. Julio Rodriguez, you're going to get him for 3 years. And let's say Paul Goldschmidt is serviceable for another year, maybe 2. Still got I think they both got what they wanted, but me being a team that's more so on the side of being competitive right now, I do like Baylor's side better.
Ty, how do you feel?
Man, I agree. Like, I agree so much. I am definitely someone that is not afraid to go buy the old guy who's having like a nice end to the career if I can get it for cheap and if it will win me a chip. Like, I will sell everything to win that. So if Paul Goldschmidt is going to hit 340 this year and that's going to win me money, I'm trading for Paul Goldschmidt. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm a big Nick Kurtz guy. I've got Nick Kurtz in a lot of leagues, and he's off to a not a great start. He's not off to the power start that I was hoping that we would get from him. And so a 2-year window, I'm a little bit iffy on. Like, if he's going to take another year to really like find his footing, and then who knows what the Athletics are going to be doing in that time. Like, I don't know. I don't dislike the trade in any way. You guys said both of these guys are ranked. So like there's points going around. Like, Riley Green is having a pretty good year. He's hitting like he's supposed to hit. Like, I don't think who he could be is who Julio could be. But again, like you're trading for another 36-year-old with Julio. So it's fairly balanced. Like, if one of these guys is going to hit a walk-off home run in week 15 on a Sunday night, I'm taking that side of the trade. Like you said, like, you can't bet on redshirt years, and you can't bet on who a guy is supposed to be. But I like to look at how I get guys in the last weekend of the year and just be like, hey, I've had you for a long time. Thanks for the win. Or, hey, welcome to the squad. This was your first game and we won the league now. I like that stuff. Like, I'm always cheering for a guy that I trade for mid-year at the deadline to maybe is off to a slow start. Maybe guys are trying to get rid of him because they want to get value on a guy like Goldschmidt. I don't blame Baylor for moving a 36-year-old Goldie who like is clearly at the end of his ropes. But if he's going to hit 20 home runs and hit 315, like, I'm taking that.
By the way, before I proceed with talking about the trade, I just want to shout out in a negative way Iona, the Cougars, and Jim, Rhode Island, and Varno for posting in Trade Block intentionally and saying, hey, who wants to make a trade during the show? While refusing to comment and talk on the show. And I've mentioned this, and I've mentioned it 20 minutes ago. Stop torturing me. Don't do this to me. You're watching the show. The comments are here. The calling is open. And all of you were sitting here saying, hey, you know what we should do? Let's piss off Ram by coordinating a trade while he's on here, producing and can barely look at the show. As I said this, by the way, Iona is calling in. So I'm going to take a moment to let Iona in a second. I'll talk about the trade here. So I generally, I think both of you guys have great points. I am very biased towards Nick Kurtz in a hold forever dynasty. I think he's going to become an iconic power hitter. I am worried about the time frame right now. That being said, Julio hasn't performed the way that I've wanted him to after his rookie year, where I thought he was going to be the new god and face of baseball. So right now, with Wiley Green performing, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to say I like the Green low and Kurtz side. A lot of that is dependent on Kurtz and his ability to adjust to the league, because the way that he's hitting right now, in comparison to the way that the ageless Paul Goldschmidt is hitting, it definitely looks like getting Julio and Goldschmidt could be a big move. But as Chris mentioned, yeah, freshman Goldschmidt, to me, my first thought is the guy's 85. I don't know how long he might there was thoughts of him retiring this year.
Mm-hmm.
I actually dropped him in a few leagues and looked like an idiot because I thought, okay, he looked horrible. He's not going to come back. And look, he's proven me wrong. So there's obviously more to Goldschmidt here than I want to admit. But I like Lowe. I like Green a lot. And I think Nick Kurtz is just a couple games away from going on one of those big runs. But if he doesn't do it, this is a great pickup for Bryant. I'll say that much. Now, speaking of the people who, like I said, I called out and I yelled at them, DFAB is here from Iona. So I've got you on the stage here, Mr. Iona. And if there's anything you'd like to say, you can feel free to have a conversation with us. What brings you onto the CBL show besides me yelling at you?
What's going on, guys? Not much. Just wanted to say hello. Saw there haven't been any callers yet. I missed the beginning of the show, so I don't know if you did the top 25 yet, and if you left me out again. But
we did do the top 25, and although you beat me a week and a half ago, it wasn't enough to knock you into the top 25. I'm sorry about that much.
Oh man, I was hoping for at least a what do you call it, the bubble for the final five there. So.
Well, we did just discuss your trade, actually. So since I have you here, now I'm going to put you on the spot for about a minute or two, right? We just discussed the fact that you traded Skubal. And I'll bring it back up for everyone who, if I had before, but it was just the idea of you moved Skubal for Schwarber and for Gore, right? So while we have you, tell me about the thought process here. It looked like for the most part, the panel kind of agreed that you got a good return out of it. The Rhode Island was pushing for win now and that you got some good years and good players out of it. How do you feel about that trade?
Yeah, so obviously it's hard to give up the best pitcher in baseball. The way I looked at it, my team, as it's currently constructed, is probably going to make it to the playoffs and lose in the first round. And I'm just like, all right, well, am I going to be happy with that? No. But once you get to the playoffs, you never know. Anyone can have a good week, and just the way the head-to-head leagues work. So I was like, all right, what can I do that will position myself for next year and not completely give up this year? So that's why I did the move. Because anyone can get Tommy John at any point. So that was my thought process there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great thought process. And I'll pick your mind on one more thing before I let you go, because this was discussed in the first half of the show. We brought up an image that talked about from Cal that talked about the fact that the Big East is the highest point scoring division in all of the conferences, right? And you, as a proud Big East member, what is your opinion on that? You've tracked these points. I've seen you comment in the Big East channel and talk about the fact that the Big East is, in your opinion, the strongest conference in all of them, right? What do you have to say about that if you're live on the air here?
Definitely. It's frustrating, that's for sure. I keep looking and tracking where I am. I'm usually top 30, top 25 now, and in points scored, and I'm probably sixth in total points in the Big East alone. I'm like, what is this? Like, there's just so many good talent ahead of me, and it's frustrating. So part of me is thinking, should I just pack it in and play for next year and make the trades now before and just to get the head of the line? Because at some point, everyone's going to give up and start trading for next season. Playoffs start pretty soon. July isn't that far away. So, but I'm holding out for now because I definitely think I can make it, and we'll see. But it's definitely frustrating. There's some really good teams here, and I play in much bigger money leagues with talent that's pretty much a joke. It's just people who have bigger wallets compared to this league. That's what I love about this group so far. Is it's only $50, I think, but it's just it's been so much more fun and entertaining. I'm watching this league more than all of my others, that's for sure. So I'm even a commissioner for a big money league that I'm paying less attention to because this one's more fun.
I had to be honest with you, and this is not for me to sound biased here in terms of on behalf of this league, but I cannot tell you out of the 128 who, just speaking to me personally, have told me not only is this the most entertaining league they've been in, but the level of talent in this league, as you've spoken to. I've been in bigger buy-in leagues with people who know less baseball than the people in this league. And I do think it is an amazing thing to look around this league. And not only the content is fun, obviously, we're having a great time out here, but there's some real talented fantasy baseball players in the pool of this league.
Mhm.
And it makes it real difficult because, like, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'll repeat it again, that there are places with bigger buy-ins with people that just have bigger pockets. It doesn't mean that they could handle the rigor of a league like this, right? And so I will say I appreciate that your willingness to call in. I'll take you off the Chris Jericho list of me calling people out because you had the stones to call in. I respect that because I have to give you credit where credit is due for calling in. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thanks for calling in. And again, shout out negatively to the rest of the guys who did not call in because, see, it was easy. It was simple. I gave him a softball. Life was good. He called in during the show. But that being said, we did get a comment while we were talking here from JC2K that said, hey, did y'all talk about any of my trades? Well, nice to know that you have time to listen in, even though you couldn't join the show. But since you were so nice in asking, let's talk about the JC trade of the week. Since there's always something to talk about, let's pull up this trade, one of FAU's trades for the week, where he acquired a freshman Brian Wu. So let's run it from the top here. JC and FAU, they trade a freshman Evan Carter, a freshman Sandy Alcantara, a freshman Dylan Dingler, a freshman Brandon Clark, a senior Tony Gonsolin, and in returns, he received a freshman Brian Wu and a sophomore Augustin Ramirez, who we just heard from Luke he's going to go out and try to acquire. Now, I would punt it to you guys normally to start, but for the fun of it, it looks like JC has called in to discuss the trade himself. So just to make sure we get the propaganda rolling right off the bat and we let the man talk himself, I'm going to have JC come out here and talk about the trade and his logic here, and he's going to tell you why it's a fair a trade for both deals and why he took on more risk than the other team.
I'm here to talk about all those things, of course, yes, because this is a very risky trade. No. Okay. I just got done spending time with the girlfriend. She's allowed me to be free, so I've come on to talk for a little bit. Sorry I couldn't make the whole show tonight, but it seems like y'all have absolutely got it under control from what I can tell.
You might have a bit of an echo there, JC. I don't know if you have us on live as well, but there's a little bit of an echo coming from your mic that normally isn't there.
I have no idea why that is. Hold on, let me see. Is it better? Is it still going? Because I have everything muted.
Yeah, there's still a rough echo coming off your side. It's not actually me messing with you. I know that I have the penchant to mess with you, but I want you to be able to talk clearly. And I'm hearing a heavy echo from your side.
Give me 1 second. Let me see.
Sure. If anything, 1 second. I will see if I can change anything on your side.
It should. Is that better at all?
Yeah, I changed some settings too, so it looks like you're good. You got a clear shot now. So talk to us about this deal and your thought process here. It's perfect now. So
okay, cool. Awesome. Well, this deal was done before Sandy's start on Saturday, as well as before Evan Carter tweaked his quad or whatever happened. That had not happened yet, so that is advantageous timing for me. And it wasn't one of those things where I was looking into Rangers, because I happen to be a Rangers fan. So it wasn't like I was looking into Rangers pages and there was some rumor coming out about Evan Carter. There truly was no prior knowledge that he was injured before that trade went down. But my thought process was, Brian Wu has been one of the better pitchers in baseball this year. If I can get a guy like that on a freshman contract, that's one of the most, I would feel, valuable freshmen that you could probably attain in this league in terms of just production value. He's 25 years old. He plays in a pitcher's park. A lot to like about Brian Wu, really across the board, however you look at things with advanced analytics or just basic numbers. Augustin Ramirez has been awesome. Is it a buy high? Probably. Do I think he's better than Dylan Dingler? 100%. So I thought that was a catching upgrade as well, was my second thought process. Brandon Clark, he's been really good this year. Obviously, he's flying up rankings, one of the more talked about pitching prospects this year. I'm okay with giving him up, though. I'm a team that I feel like can compete this year, next year. Not sure he's in the time frame where he's really going to contribute to that over the next couple of years, which is my goal, the next 1, 2, 3 years to compete. And he's the type of prospect where I got him off waivers like a few weeks ago. There will be another Brandon Clark at some point. My goal is to find that guy before other people do and add another asset like that to my team. Outside of that, I mean, Sandy has been awesome, but at the same time, or Sandy has not been awesome. He's been awesome before. He's been really bad this year. Do I think there's bounce back potential? Absolutely. Where is it? I don't know at this point, to be totally honest. I mean, he's struggled big time, and he just continues to struggle. Every time he has a good start going, he gives up a home run and 4 runs in his last inning. Like, it just every time something good happens there, it seems to fall apart. So I'm just kind of going to get off that train and go with the guy that I feel like is more reliable. And Gonsolin as a senior, I was kind of trying to clear a roster spot anyway. So this cleared a couple of roster spots, gave me the flexibility. I mean, I feel like I gave up a package of interesting names, but I got the guy that I think is easily the most valuable piece in this trade. And it's not impossible that I got the second most valuable player as well.
Yeah, I love to mess with you, and you know that. And this is absolutely not one of those deals where, as much as I would love to go out there and say that, oh, you fleeced another person, JC, I don't think you did. But I do think you got the better end of the deal. I think you encompassed it really, really well. A couple things that I want to touch on that I like. First off, you always want to get the best player in the deal. I think right now in our league, a freshman Brian Wu is the best player in the deal. You ended up there. That's a great move on your part. On top of that, something that you mentioned that ties into some of the things we've been saying throughout the show and overall, freshman Brandon Clark that you got, how'd you get him? For free off the waivers, and you moved him, right? There is a humongous, gigantic amount of helium under Brandon Clark right now throughout the season that did not exist preseason. And he's out there and everyone wants a piece of Brandon Clark. But you got him for free and you moved him. Now, yes, buying Augustin Ramirez as a sophomore is a bit of a buy high, but selling Brandon Clark right now is an outstanding sell high. We know what can happen with pitching prospects. We know the volatility of this world out there. I think this is a great move on your part, as much as I hate to say it, in terms of giving up, like you said, a set of interesting names, because this isn't just a set of mystery boxes. There are some interesting names here, right? We've got the idea of Evan Carter is somebody who, if he puts it together by the end of this year, you could get 3 really good years out of him. Alcantara may not be good this year, but you could still get 3 good years out of him. Dylan Dingler's been putting up pretty good. Clark is a mystery box, but he could be valuable, and Gonsolin has something that is worthwhile. He's still pitching pretty good. So it's not like you gave up nothing here. You gave up some value, but you could ask any contender in the top 25, and if you ask them, would you roster a freshman Brian Wu over most of their pitchers right now? And I think unanimously they would jump to do so, because even some of the best names, as somebody who rosters Framber Valdez, has not been as effective. And to have that as a freshman, a young guy in a pitcher's park, it is a really good move. So I'm going to give you kudos for that one. Peter also wants to see your dog, by the way. And I'm going to
I don't know where he is.
I'm gonna punt to those two guys for their reaction to the trade in a second. But since we're doing Shock Jockey Radio here, and I have you on with Chris for one of the rare moments, right? Earlier we had some commentary made by Chris where he not only called himself the best team in the league, but he said the only other juggernaut in the conference was the Columbia Lions.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
since I've given people an opportunity to talk, and you were brave enough to come on air, which I respect, and I have to give kudos to, right? I will give you an opportunity to respond before I go back to the trade. What is your opinion on
I have
that?
2 responses. Number 1, this year, I'm still going to get him. So I'm just going to say that. I'm still going to get him this year. But if anybody would like to compare the FAU roster and the FIU roster and see which roster you think is set up for contention for years to come, feel free to do that. The answer is me. I have not only built a team that can compete this year, but I think I've legitimately built a team that can compete for the next 2 to 3 years at least. I have a lot of depth and a lot of talent and years of control contract-wise. Chris's team, he's got himself some pieces, but I don't think it's the same level. My personal opinion.
No, I mean, I'll give him his kudos. I think it was just kind of a little reminder that 13 and 100 point week is the reason why the points got so close, right? And when you have that level of consistency of like 850, FIU not losing to the league average yet.
Oh, well, I had one bad week. It does happen, doesn't it? You've almost lost a couple times, so be careful.
Hey,
it might be coming.
That's true. Listen, I mean, I already did lose. I did lose to Marshall. I've had horrible starts in like half of the weeks where I've had to beat the league average in the last like 2 days.
Right.
But, Ty mentioned this earlier in the show. When you can stack 5 or 6 starts later in the week, it can change everything, right? Like even this week, I think I have a 6-start day on Friday. So I know it'll be a bit of a slow climb to it, but hey, listen, it was just to give a little kudos to our commish, right? You know, everyone made fun of him for going pitching heavy, and look at him now, right? Still in the thick of it. But
hey,
I mean,
Columbia's he's a threat. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Your
I'm not disagreeing.
to that jump in the ranking definitely helped, right? You went from, I don't remember where you were last. Yeah,
well, he went up 4. I brought this up for point of reference, but he is in the top 10 now. You know, he jumped 4 spots to make the top 10.
That's true. And interestingly enough, which I'm sure JC knows, this conference might be decided last week, right? We play each other week 15. I knew that from the jump, right? I made sure to look at when I play at FAU. I still have to play Georgia Southern. I think that's in that same time frame. I think
Georgia Southern got me already this year. Georgia Southern I cannot believe the lack of. Yeah, I mean, that team's going to be top 15 very soon.
Absolutely. Probably. If things keep up, you know, then the 1 seed in the tourney could end up being decided week 15 in the American Conference, which is why I keep saying you guys can talk about overall points and all. The American Conference has the most competition top to bottom. Sure, we're outnumbering you because there's 2 of us here, right? Not even cross-state rivals. We're like an hour and a half away. But at the end of the day, this conference, people made fun of it. We had a Red Sox-themed team, 2 pitching teams, and we're being brought down, no shot at Clay, by Memphis, right? Memphis is at negative points, I think, at some point for the entirety of the season. So that point total might be a little bit different if Memphis wasn't entirely selling. So shout out to the American Conference. I'll stop glazing us. It's just a four-man panel right now.
The Biggies had their fun. I had a few people call in, not even of my own accord. They did it for fun, and I appreciate that. So with JC calling in, I think it's only fair to even it out. And if I go back to that trade for a little bit, JC, I did pull up the top 25. I always love to have your opinion. Top 25 is on the screen. Is there anything there that jumps out at you or anything that you'd want to provide for the CBL viewers that you want to talk about?
Kind of put me on the spot here because I've done absolutely no preparation at all. Let me scroll through here real quickly. Kansas State struggled last week. I noticed that. I don't know if y'all talked about Kansas State.
7-point drop in the rankings.
But that was a significant struggle, and they're below league average again this week. Now, again, it's early in the week. We're halfway through Tuesday points, maybe most way through Tuesday, but they're under league average again. That's a team that was undefeated until last week, went 0-2, lost to league average.
And they play Baylor this week.
That could be. I mean, that's the type of week where you could easily get 3, maybe even 4 losses here in the last 2 weeks, basically. And that's a team that I'm looking at, and I think the pitching is kind of what might be doing them in a little bit. I'm looking at some of these names, and it's just guys like Mitchell Parker and Yario Rodriguez and Chase Petty's been terrible. Just some different guys in here who I don't think are quite giving the contributions that he might be expecting, especially lately. And I think the pitching might be doing him in a little bit. So that's a drop that honestly does not surprise me with the way last week went for him. And it's going to be interesting to see if his team can bounce back.
All right, so not to press you too much on top 25 because you did no research, like you said. That's not your fault. But I will throw something out to you for fun here before I let you go and we go back to the trades. You know, Kansas City had to drop in the rankings for you to hit the top 10, right? And you yourself, potentially a beneficiary of adding the people in the voting panel and saying, hey, please, Dad, look at me. Please vote for me. And
I was searching for my top 10 spot, and I got it.
We've seen some people do that in terms of, you know, we saw reactions to Temple early on when they were loud about the fact that they didn't make it. Tulane has talked about that and has seen moves up as well, right? Now, speaking from personal experience, I'm putting you on the spot here without research. Do you think there's some merit to calling out the voting panel through Discord and saying, hey, look at me, Dad. Look at what I did on the tricycle today? Because it looks like when you think about over these few weeks, results have shown that some people with the loudest mouths are getting fed.
Yes. I think there is a certain amount of validity to that. That's how it works. When you talk loud, you're going to be on people's minds, if nothing else, for good or bad. That being said, I have the 7th most points in the entire league this year. Last week was the most points that any team has scored all year, except for the first period, which was like a 10, 11-day period because of the way opening day started. So, like, it was the best week anybody's team has had all year in a team of 128 teams, 7 periods in. and I have the 7th most points in the country. So I don't know. I feel like it was a relatively deserved bump, I would say. But I certainly think talking about your merits and ignoring the downsides potentially can be a good way to go sometimes. It certainly won't hurt, will it?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at who got bumped down, right? You jumped Columbia, who took a loss.
Mhm.
You jumped. You had them up in the screen, and
I got you.
They're
I got it
back.
right back for you.
Kansas State, 2 losses, jumped them. So I mean, there's like you said, there is merit to being loud, but credit where credit's due, right? After the biggest week, non-week 1 related, you got some teams that dropped. Like I think if Kansas State doesn't drop that undefeated, and you see Columbia take down myself, who at the time was ranked 3rd, maybe you don't see FAU at 10. But again, you got the point. It's not like you're there because of just other teams falling out. You're the only 3-loss team in the top 10. It's for a reason. Top 7 in scoring is not easy. I know we'll have that discussion as it continues, right? I think you're up to almost 300 points this week again. So, yeah, I mean, there's merit to both of those points.
Good. And JC, I do want to thank you as much. Of course, I like to mess with you, but I really do appreciate that you went ahead and you jumped on, because that's the fun of it all. And getting you here with Chris for a second is great. So I'm going to give you a second before I let you off, before we go back to the trade. Is there anything that you want to say?
I am happy to stay if you want me to.
Do you want to stay on? And
generally we have 4. I'm happy to hang out. I'll take more of a back seat, but I'm happy to hang out if you want me to, because I'm free for the rest of the night.
We're just going to discuss a few more trades before we get off for the night, and I'd be happy to have your opinion if you're willing to stick around.
Let's do it. I'm in.
All right. So now that since we have you here and it can be done to your face, let's go right back to that Wu trade and ask the guys here, because they didn't get to talk about what their opinions were. So let's talk here. Ty, I'll go to you. You've had some time to think about this one. How do you feel about this deal? What stands out to you?
Look, anytime I see 5 names move for 2, I kind of have an idea of who I think is going to win that trade. Again, like we've been saying all day, I can't see the future of who Evan Carter is going to be for the Cougars. He could be great. I have a hard time trusting back injuries. And I'm just going to pull off from like the CBL angle and talk like just baseball. I have a back issue and a nerve issue, and some days I just don't have it. And it's just the way it is. And for somebody so young to have such a slow start to a career, I'm worried about when he starts to pick up steam, if and when he gets healthy again. If it's a quad injury this time, that's fine. But with a nerve injury, man, and especially a back nerve injury and anything going on like that, we've seen that kind of nerve injury stuff end people's careers like overnight. And well, of course, no, I'm not trying to make deals based on that. And I'm not trying to avoid players solely based on that. Look, like we've said, there's some big potential on this team. Sandy Alcantara won a Cy Young Award and led the league in innings. Like I'm not afraid of Sandy. Maybe this guy's got some more time. I haven't looked deep into the teams, but I'm taking a freshman Brian Wu on a Mariners team that's hitting, especially. Like, if this was maybe 2 years ago and the Mariners are hitting Mendoza line, maybe I'm a little bit more hesitant. But the Mariners are raking, so I'm taking wins there. I didn't notice the first time it popped up that the date was there. I was curious if JC got him before the 2-start week, because that's another thing in this league and in just fantasy in general that like savvy players look into is who's on a 2-start week and who can I go pick up. And that at the end of the year, that can be a huge thing. Somebody starts on a Monday, you trade from on a Tuesday, he comes back on a Saturday. That sounds like a pretty good trade to me if you're going to pull off a league average win in the last 2 days of the year or last 2 days of the week. And I'm in on Augustin. He had a really great start, and he's kind of been leveling out. But I think if you're going to get power out of a catcher position, I'm okay taking it there, especially on a nice long deal like that. Give him some time to find his footing. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think we're risking him being sent down. So yeah, I definitely think JC wins this. I hope Sandy gets moved to a contender, and I hope Sandy goes on to pitch 15 games after the All-Star break and wins every one of them. I'm just not going to buy it until I see it.
Yeah. Just one other thing I will add. The Evan Carter thing, I'm a Rangers fan. I loved that guy. 2023, he was like My favorite player in the world, lighting the world on fire. I had him in another league at the end of 2023, and he was a guy who came up from a minor spot and just carried me down the stretch last month of the year. And then just watching the playoffs, honestly, was really, really nice too. Like, that's a guy who I've been a big fan of. He's a huge platoon bat at this point. He has shown no ability whatsoever to hit lefties. And he's also just not hitting the ball that hard. I think that's the most frustrating thing for me, is that even the minor league numbers this year, there was some positive regression after a very rough start, but he just didn't hit the ball that hard.
Yeah.
Comes up to the majors, doesn't hit the ball that hard. He's an elite defender. He's got plus speed, and he's shown pop, but it just, I don't know if it's the back. He's just hasn't seemed right for a year and a half. And it's like,
with back injuries,
I almost want to just take the value I can before it's gone, and before I'm like sitting here, oh, people view this guy as a waiver wire player now. I'm not getting anything. Because I feel like if he doesn't hit for the rest of this year, the value is going to take a nosedive. And who knows, maybe magic happens. He heals. He's a 5.5 point per game guy. All of a sudden, it's like, well, you take the L, but I'm just going to deal with what's in front of my face right now, I guess.
I had a startup draft last year that I got super aggressive and a little bit maybe carried away, and traded my 1-4 for the guy's second, third, and fourth round picks, thinking, okay, I'll take a year to chill. I'm picking up every stud outfielder under the age of 22. And one of them was Jordan Walker, and one of them was Evan Carter. And you just miss sometimes, right? You just miss. I knew I was buying early on Jordan Walker. I knew maybe he wasn't a 5th round dynasty pick where I got him, but I thought a guy with that size, a guy who swings the bat as hard as he does, if the Cardinals trade him, he's going to become the best player in the league. So I'm still hoping that happens. But with these young guys who come up and make such an impact early, you get that pedigree hit where once they reach that, they're going to become either a regular baseball player, or they're never going to leave your team. And sometimes, especially when a guy hits an IL right after coming back up, before that, obviously the deal was made, but it might be time to get what you can get, like JC said, right? He might come back up and be a great player next year, and it might bite you in the ass. He also might not be a major league contributor.
Chris, what do you got?
I mean, I'll keep it short since you guys have pretty much nailed everything. I think the biggest question mark to me is Jim acquiring, and again, I don't like talking about red shirts because I don't know what his roster construction is like. I don't really see the purpose in a selling team to acquire Tony Gonsolin, right? I know he's still got value, and I'm assuming he's going to try to flip him here before the deadline. But taking it for face value, which is what I have, the Tony Gonsolin addition doesn't really make much sense. Does it make sense for Jim to acquire a bunch of freshman contracts with some upside? Of course, right? Sandy's still Sandy. He's struggling. At the end of the day, we know the talent is there, though. Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it. I know we can flip him. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, you get a freshman Brian Wu, right? I think if it were me, I would have tried to get a more consolidated level talent for what a freshman Brian Wu could get back. I love Agustin Ramirez. You guys have harped on him, for the past 10 minutes. I don't want to keep on mentioning. I think JC wins this pretty favorably. It's not necessarily just that he gets the best player and arguably the second best player. I think it's I see that. I think it's just again, the value in pitching in this league is astronomical, right? We've had a bit of a discussion here in the last week over rule changes and scoring changes and whatnot, and this is part of the reasons why scoring changes can be so difficult in a league of this size and with how much time goes into these roster constructions, right? Pitching is very valuable. We're going to continue to see that. I don't think, regardless of any rule changes that happen or may or may not happen, pitching is still going to be very valuable. You can't not do that. After what we've seen, we have teams who are super pitch heavy and not as high. Like if you go back in Fantrax and you look at the scoring for each team, DBU is well ahead of everybody in pitching, but I don't think he cracks the top 30 in offense, right? So pitching still holds a lot of value in this league, and getting a freshman Brian Wu is for what you paid, I get that the Evan Carter being a homer is a bit of a hard to give up and whatnot. And you gave up some good names. I'm not saying it's an absolute fleece. This isn't a cry for a veto, but you definitely, JC FAU definitely won that. Jim, I'm sure has a plan for that senior Gonsolin, but I'll give the edge to FAU.
I didn't totally understand the Gonsolin inclusion either, to be completely transparent, because that was we talked about it, and I basically offered the deal as is without Gonsolin, and he wanted Gonsolin as part of the deal specifically, and I was like,
I'm sure
an arm on the Dodgers
to
2-start week is pretty valuable, right? If he's going to pitch like he's going to pitch, selling him after a 2-start week with the Dodgers getting 2 wins, him going 8 each time is going to get him something. But you're dealing for it for the future, right? You're hoping somebody sees him and comes to buy him.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if Ram saw this on on Discord, but Rhode Island responded to me asking, what he flipped, what he ended up, replacing Kyle Schwarber with, and I'll take blame for sending him his Michael Garcia, and I don't know who sent him the Max Muncy, but at the end of the day, he had a plan and he got 2 bats back that fill that hole pretty nicely.
I also, that's a great time for me to remind people that if you comment on the YouTube, I can put your goddamn comment on the screen. And if you at me on the Discord that I'm not looking at while I'm on the show, I cannot put you on the stream. So this is why I encourage people to comment on the YouTube so I can take the responses and put them on the screen, as Chris mentioned. And I appreciate him responding to that, because you're right, he did get Muncy and Michael Garcia during that. I have one more trade to discuss with you guys, because as the team owner who accepted it said, I accepted the trade. I moved on from Jesus, but not from God. And if that's not a tie-in to whoever got moved in this deal, I can't think of one better. So you can see Jordan Southern, and this is great for you guys to talk about because it's right on the heels of the two of you, Chris and JC. Jordan Southern moves off a freshman Made, a freshman Thomas White, freshman Henderson, a freshman Cowser, and a sophomore Horner to receive from Chuck over at UCF, senior Quan, senior Schwellenbach, senior David Peterson, senior Zach Geloff, a junior Imanaga, and a junior Trey Turner. Physically and in names, this was probably the biggest deal that was made from last week to this week, and there is a lot to break down when it comes down to this. So I'm going to throw it out to you guys, because we're going to try to see if this will be the last one for the show. Chris, I'll start with you. Do you have an opinion on this? How do you feel about this? Is a big deal.
I mean, I obviously have a negative opinion about it, right? Being in the American Conference, it's a lot of talent coming to an already very talented team in Georgia Southern. You give up a lot of control to get that talent, right? Freshman Made, a lot of freshman contracts aside from Horner, who's a sophomore, but you are getting back, 2 years of Shota, 2 years of Trey Turner, so it kind of evens out in terms of the win now mentality that Georgia Southern definitely has. And I think this is what we were harping on about in the beginning of the show and in weeks past. As the weeks go on, you start to kind of see where you fall. Georgia Southern's now in a position to buy. Maybe not so much 4, 5, 6 weeks ago when he wasn't sure how this roster was going to work. But, the numbers don't lie. He's putting up a lot of points, and he's getting a lot of points back for his haul. I think, for what UCF is doing, who's clearly, building for the future, he does get some good pieces. But I'm going to lean on the Georgia Southern side, mainly for what he's trying to do this year, right? The American Conference is up for grabs. And aside from DBU, right, there's no clear-cut number 2, right? We can say LSU, I think, is second in points, or Santa Clara, something like that, but still 8 weeks left in the regular season. Number 2 is up for discussion. There's no clear-cut consensus number 2. We haven't had the same number 2 probably in 3-4 weeks in the rankings. So, GSU is definitely making a big move to stay competitive with the JCs and the Rhode Islands and everybody else that's constantly dealing on Discord. And UCF is a tough cookie to deal with. I've mentioned the amount of trades that I've had this season, 75, 76, something like that. I think 60 before the season started. Not a single one with UCF, and we've tried. It's not. He's not an easy guy to trade with. So I don't even know how this went down. There's just so many names. It's just like I wouldn't. When I see trades this big in my mind, I try to not even process it because it's like I don't want to go into the value of a freshman made versus the value. So in reality, there we go. I agree. If you send me a deal where it's like 6 players for 6 players, I'm not reading it. There's no way I'm going to process every single one by one. But if I have to at this point, because Ram puts me on the spot, I'm going to lean Georgia Southern.
JC, what do you got?
Okay. Thinking about the UCF strategy, first of all, is what I want to start with because he talked a little more about the Georgia Southern side. UCF, it was in Discord a couple weeks ago and basically said he made a couple trades for a couple like senior, junior contracts and with a bad team, a team that I don't know if he even had a win at that point, and basically said that he enjoyed spoiling people's weeks. You know what? I respect that, but this trade makes a lot more sense to me in terms of along the lines of what I think he's probably should be looking to do long term. Because I try to match up player for player when it comes to evaluating a trade. I think, and is it Made? I've always thought it was Jesus Made, and people say
I have no idea.
I thought it was Jesus Made. I thought that's how it was pronounced. I could be wrong. But that's what I thought.
I think it is Jesus Made, by the way. I
Yeah.
just like to make the little jokes about Georgia saying that they gave up Jesus. But
no, the fact that he put that in the trade completed was hilarious. But I am a Jesus Made owner. He's like my one of my like 2 gold chip prospects left. And I think he's incredible. He's also 18 years old. Like he's a kid. So he's probably worth more 1-to-1 than a guy like a senior Quan or one of these senior players probably is, but he is probably the headlining prospect in this deal. And even if you think of him as worth a couple of these seniors, now to be fair, Stephen Quan was atrocious post All-Star break last year and was really, really great before the All-Star break. Not sure if that's a sign of things to come, but he's been really good this year. Can he keep it going second half of the year? We'll see. You only have him for another 4 months. So that's the thing here is that for Georgia Southern, yeah, I totally get it. I think it makes sense to give up assets like this, especially guys like Made and White who aren't really impacting your team right now. Kauser with his injuries as well may not have a huge impact this year, especially with how dysfunctional things have been in Baltimore. Now, I still believe Kauser's a guy who has impact potential, even with some of the struggles he's had at times the last year or so. Nico Horner's a really good piece to give up. That's the only part that I'm like for Georgia Southern that it's like a guy who's impacting at that level at the MLB with a sophomore contract who's just a consistent everyday guy and who you're going to be able to count on the next few years without injury. As much as he gets a lot of talent back, Georgia Southern, I kind of like the haul for UCF, to be totally honest, because Thomas White's a valuable prospect. Logan Henderson has been awesome, another valuable prospect. He's been really impactful this year. If you are giving up names like Trey Turner, Shota Imanaga, Stephen Kwan, Spencer Schwellenbach, you should be getting valuable pieces back. And he did. And he got a couple MLB pieces back too, which is what I like. These aren't all long shot or far away guys. Made might be the furthest away, but even he might only be 2 years out. I mean, we never know with how well he's playing. So I kind of like this deal for UCF. This makes sense for what he's trying to build. And these are guys who could have an MLB impact as soon as the end of this year, next year.
yeah, Ty, I see you nodding a few times with JC there. How do you feel?
I agree. Like people are saying, anytime I see a trade with this many names in it, it's too hard to look at it and call a winner. But I like it for both parties too, right? Like they're obviously doing something on purpose. And Henderson, I'm rostering Henderson in a redraft league, and I do not roster rookie pitchers in redraft leagues. That is not something that I'm in the business of doing. I'm not dropping him. Like he's been outstanding. And a lot of these guys are right there. Like Thomas White, I don't know what he's ranked right now, but has been a top 10 pitcher in the minors right now. And he's going to be up sooner rather than later. I don't see him taking that long to get there. And all of these senior contracts, I'm seeing 2 senior pitchers, and we know what can happen, right? Like Pearson has been good, and the Mets pitching staff has been really, really good. I don't know if he's going to be that guy, like if he's going to be a huge contributor, but for a team that wants to win, like I've been saying this all day, I will trade you everything if I'm going to win money, right? Like I don't care who I give away if I'm going to make a couple $100 off of this trade. And all of those pieces he's getting back, the Geloff is kind of a whatever to me, but everybody else those are impact names. Spencer Schwellenbach looked like a top 10 pitcher for the first 5 or 6 starts of the year this year, even with Atlanta playing like they've never seen a baseball field before. And like JC said, Quan is going to come back on after the All-Star break. And I like it. I understand both teams here. Like people are saying losing Horner sucks, and like super consistent cornerstone. And you don't really get that a lot and on some years of control, but you know, you got to give something back. He's obviously giving away, I don't know what Geloff's eligibility is in this league right off the top of my head, but I can't complain about either side. I wouldn't want to read this deal in my inbox, but when I see it, I'm like, yeah, both of these guys did something. So good for you. You know, both teams can be in different places and want different things, and both teams can come out of a deal with better teams. And moving off of guys who are not going to help you and are not going to get you any value in 100 days is the move right now, right? So I like it for both teams here.
Yeah, to touch on, Chris mentioned this in terms of the Gonsolin acquisition in the last deal with JC, and we said, hey, maybe it doesn't always make sense on the surface. Chuck was getting a lot of answers and mentions like that, saying like, why are you acquiring? You didn't have a win. Because JC is correct. I think at the time he might have been a winless team acquiring. And look, it makes sense. You might want to stockpile the seniors because somebody's going to come around, and it may not be the FIU or the FAU. And this time it was Georgia, who says, look, I want to compete in my conference. I think I've got something. Why don't you take all my big prospects? And I agree with Ty in terms of I don't really know how the hell that trade came together. I don't know if it came as simple as that. Georgia said, listen, I'll give you all my prospects that you like. Just let me compete with the big boys of the league, because this is a lot of talent. I mean, Schwellenbach has looked really good. I hate that he's on the Braves because he's good. Peterson is solid. Quan is solid. If Imanaga stays healthy, Trey Turner stays healthy, these are chips that can really push you from, let's say, third in that conference to one in that conference. Because to Chris's point, to JC's point about the depth of that conference and about how close it can be and how razor thin it can be, this could be a deal that we look back at, a few weeks down the line and say, wow, Georgia Southern just juggernauted themselves into the top, and now they're the big name out of the American, right? And this is not to poke fun at Chris or JC. It's actually just the reality of, you look at the amount of players that can impact here. Yes, and I like Nico Horner too, right? But when you think about it, I mean, you've got three big arms there, and Schwelle, Peterson, and Imanaga, who score points. Whether or not you like Peterson or not, he scores the points. Imanaga can score points. Turner's an impact player. If Quan can keep it up, but even if Geloff sucks, right? You've added 5 starters to your team, and you gave up prospect names, Made, White, Henderson, Cowser, sure, and you gave up a starter in Horner. I'll give you that, but that's 5 starters. That's a big boy deal, So I want to give Georgia Southern their credit for that one. That is a real move.
Yeah, this is the time of year that I start doing looking at the 7th and 8th and 9th teams if I'm a seller, which in this league I am. And the beautiful thing about this league is that there's 8 conferences to go look at who's 7 through 10 and just start, hey, how many games out are you? Yeah. I'm not, obviously, like the guys who have been making those big deals all year aren't going to have a ton of gold chip prospects left. But the teams who are in the middle, who have been quiet and who have been waiting to see what they need to do, the next couple of weeks is when I'm going to start messaging these, upper middle tier teams and conferences who are looking to make a push, who have stuff to sell. And this looks to be like exactly what's going on here.
Yeah. I have one last thing. I think David Peterson is one of the most underrated arms in fantasy. The guy never gives up more than 2 earned runs. I think he's given up more than 2 earned runs 3 times in the last year and a half.
Yeah,
he's one of the most consistent guys.
We agree about where, especially as a Mets fan, I talked about this earlier on in the year with Ash, where I said, listen, David Peterson is a lot better than anyone and their mom gives him credit for, because he's been so goddamn consistent for the Mets, and he's also not getting hurt. So for the end of the day, I love that guy. Now, we've swung around the table for a few times here. I'm going to wrap it up here because we try to keep it under 2 hours. But, of course, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity for a last take. JC, you jumped on first, but I'll still give you that chance. Is there anything you want to say before we get off the air tonight?
Not much. I'm glad I got to hop on here for a little bit, talk some baseball. It's good to talk to you, Ty. We've never done one of these before, so it's good to
nice to meet you.
Good to hear your input. Good to meet you face to face as well. It's always fun to do these shows, man. I enjoy it, and so I'm glad to be back. Good to chop it up with you as well, Chris, and of course, Ram. And, I enjoy doing this. We'll see y'all next week. I will be here next week as well, so I'm looking forward to it.
Ty, what do you got?
Thanks you guys for having me. I had a great time. I didn't know if my computer had a mic or a camera up until 20 minutes before we turned this on. So it looked like I did okay. And thanks for, putting me on and plugging some of my work. And I appreciate everybody in the BDS community checking out some of the stuff I've been writing. love taking information. If people have different resources that they like learning things on, hit me up. I'm a baseball savant junkie. I'm about to go read 3 or 4 articles right now that they just put out. They just released 4 new bat tracking things, and I need to go learn about that. So I'm going to get lost in that for a bit. But yeah, I love talking baseball. Open to chat with anybody about anything baseball related. Appreciate you guys having me on. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you, Chris. Take us home.
Yeah, honestly, again, shout out to Ash for letting the dogs run loose today on the pod. No pun intended. I'm glad everything's okay with Ash's furry family friend. But at the end of the day, great time coming on. Oh, it's been about, I think, 2-week hiatus. Glad to be back. And we've talked a lot. 2 weeks.
I'm a Mark Vientos guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right.
There we go.
Offensively, maybe not defensively.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I guess I'll leave it with the Vamos Gatos. Go Panthers up 4-1 against Carolina.
Oh.
And not a lot of hockey fans in here, but gotta give props to the Panthers. Hopefully, get into their 3rd straight Stanley Cup.
Yeah, screw the Panthers. They beat the Leafs. But no, I do want to. I
Brad
want to thank all
Marchand
of
beat
you.
the Leafs.
That's true.
Yes.
Right, Matt Marchand's got a roughing call. So
I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, and everyone who called in as well. Thank you so much for making this what it is so far. It has been a lot of fun. Thank you to Ash for letting us give it a shot here without you for the time being. I still miss you, and I still want you on. So next week, this is right back in your corner, and I'm going to take a break. But thank you all for running through it tonight. Thank you for listening. Take care. All the best to all of you.